Hey, it's Dean DeMarzo here on Dean Talks Music, and today we're going to be remaking a Bring Me the Horizon song from scratch. We're going to go into the arrangement and sound design of this song, as well as a lot of mixing choices made to help all the pieces fit together. So last week I released a cover of Bring Me the Horizon's Kingslayer on my other YouTube channel, Longest Solo Ever. If you haven't seen that channel, I cover music from video games, metal songs, pop songs, a little bit of everything. And last week we did Kingslayer. Now, if you've heard the song, it features the Japanese metal band BABYMETAL on it. They're a really cool band. They blend like J-pop singers with really awesome progressive metal guitars. It's a really cool sound. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't heard them. And their vocalist features on this song. Now, I am not a J-pop singer, so I used a Vocaloid, Hatsune Miku, to sing all of BABYMETAL's parts on this song. I did handle all the singing and screaming for Bring Me the Horizon singers' parts, Ollie Sykes. In this video, I'm going to cover the arrangement and sound design in depth, and then we're going to cover the mixing in depth in next week's video. So this is the Pro Tools session for Kingslayer. It looks really daunting when you first pull it up. I promise it's not as bad as it looks. We're going to take this piece by piece and just kind of examine what we've got going on here. I'm going to expand these out so we can see this a little better. Now, the first thing you'll notice, I have the original Bring Me the Horizon track here in the session. I'm not going to play it for you because you know what it sounds like and I don't need the copyright strike. But it's there so I can listen back and forth while I'm working, and it's all lined up perfectly to the timeline. So it lines up exactly with what I'm doing. I can jump back and forth, see how what I'm working on compares to the sound they got on the original record. This is something I do anytime I'm remaking a song. You'll see me do it on my live streams all the time. It is easily the most important part of the process for me. So the song starts with a synth lead. Let's talk about the design of this synth lead first, because I really feel like it sets the tone for the entire song. It's this gritty, dark, organic sounding synthesizer, and I made it using my favorite synth of all time, which is Serum. Let's take a listen to the sound of this lead synthesizer. Now, at first glance, this is not a complicated synthesizer patch. If you're familiar with Serum, this is literally the two basic waveforms it gives you when you open it up. I didn't do anything here. All the interest is happening in the effects tab. I'm going to turn these effects off, and let's build this synth up from step one. I'll even turn off oscillator B. We're just going to hear oscillator A. This is a simple saw wave. Nothing crazy going on there yet. Let's bring in oscillator B. Still nothing too crazy going on. Here's where I bring in one of my favorite synth sound design tricks. This is something I learned when I was trying to make like a Skrillex type lead, like from Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites. Now, just take a listen to what happens when I introduce this LFO. I'll explain what's going on in a moment. An LFO is a device that moves a setting back and forth at whatever speed you like. In this case, I have it going pretty fast. It's moving at 86 times a second. And what it's moving is the fine tuning of oscillator B. This is the tuning. This is just a really, really fast vibrato. I can slow it down. You can hear what's happening. Take a listen. I'll turn off oscillator A so we can just hear B. Do you hear how it becomes this cool, gritty distortion? I love that effect. So that's what's happening here. We're driving LFO1 into the fine tuning of oscillator B. Now, let's move on to the effects. I've got 4 effects in a row here, and I'll walk you through what each of them are doing. The first one I always apply to just about any synthesizer lead I'm using is a distortion effect. And it might be a lot, it might be a little. In this case, it's a lot. Let's take a listen to the distortion. You hear it immediately got a lot louder for one, but also introduced a lot of cool fizzy harmonic resonance to the top end. Now, running into that distortion, I'm using Hyper and Dimension, which introduces very tiny micro pitch shifts and just a little bit of room reverb. I think. I honestly don't really know how this one works. It feels like it's doing that. And that's going to kind of add to the instability of this synthesizer going into the distortion. Anytime you apply an effect before distortion, it gets like 10 times messier. It's great. And we're using that to our advantage here. After that hyper, I'm adding a chorus. And let's hear what happens before those and after. So you can hear it's not a huge drastic difference. It just feels like it's warbling a little bit, like it's just on the edge of falling apart. The reverb is what really adds the final touch here, though. Check this out. This is an incredibly short reverb. You can see I have my size and decay all the way down. This is a very tiny, tiny reverb. It's barely adding anything. Even the mix is pretty quiet. But because it's before the distortion, it's just kind of crunching up the end of the note. I'll take it in and out again, and you'll hear how much of this organic edge it adds to the sound. I know I spent a lot of time on that one synthesizer, but it's literally the first thing you hear in the song, and it's the main lead element in the song besides the vocals, so it's super important. It sets the tone for the entire piece. Let's talk about the rhythm section in the intro. There's 3 distinct layers happening here. There's the drums, the bass, and the guitars. Let's take a look at the drums first. Here is our percussion section for the intro. Let's take a listen. And this is made up of 4 parts. We have an acoustic drum set. This is Get Good Drums Invasion Kit, which is just my go-to for everything these days. And it could not be playing a simpler pattern. Doubling those kicks and snares are a couple pieces from Native Instruments' Battery Drum Sample Collection. This is the kick arena and snare arena samples. And those are just kind of augmenting the drum set. The final piece are these kind of really quick kind of hats going on. I have them labeled here as D&B hats. They sound like from like a drum and bass beat. They sound like this. This is the Teddy Killer's drum loop, hi-hat loop from Splice. Let's take a listen to that all together. And it really is this hi-hat loop adding all the spice to this. Check it out. On top of that, we have the bass and guitars. The bass is just Contact, I think, the Submission Eurobass library. Just playing the root notes. And then guitars. We'll talk about this more in the mix video, but I'm basically just playing 2 guitar parts here, and each of those guitar parts gets run through 2 different amps. Here's a Fortin Nameless amp, and Toneforge Jason Richardson. And all together, we get this nice big guitar and bass tone because they're all playing in unison together. Put that together with our drums. Now we put our synthesizers on top of that, and we have our intro. As we close out of this first half of the intro, we have this nice little glitch effect. This is from the Virtual Riot glitch compilation on Splice as well. I love using Splice for my samples. And this just fills in this little space at the end of the intro. Check it out. Now that sample did not originally sound like that. This is a little bit more sound design. I'm doing a couple things to change the sound. Here's the original sample. And I'm adding a little bit of sample rate reduction and bit depth, bit crushing. Check it out. And then I have an EQ to cut out or boost the highs from it. Okay, we have a new synthesizer enter the ring in this second half here, helpfully labeled Intro Boops. And this is, again, Serum. This isn't anything crazy either. You can see it's mostly the reverb and distortion trick we were doing earlier. Here's what it sounds like without that. In this case, it's just a couple saw waves, one at the main octave of the synth, and one an octave below. It's so quiet though, it's barely there. We hear more of it once we introduce the distortion. Then we have a filter here, which is connected to this LFO. Check it out. And that is every eighth note. This just kind of opens and closes a little bit. Womp, 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 womp. We add reverb and distortion. And that's our sound. Then we have some classic just dubstep wubs going on down here. And this is just the monster waveform oscillating back and forth through the wavetable. Could not be simpler. Just literally hook the LFO up to wavetable position and call it a day. We're at the verse now. And again, we have that hi-hat loop from before. And this time we've sequenced in some drum samples. And I literally just pasted these into the timeline. I didn't feel like loading up a sampler just for these when I knew exactly where I wanted them. So I just pasted them in. I did a little stutter edit here. On top of that, we have this verse guitar part. Again, I consider this more of a sound design thing, so we'll talk about it here. That's just a regular electric guitar going through ToneForge. And this is the Kilohertz phase distortion. I think this comes with the Slate Everything bundle. And this just makes things sound weird. It just sounds like flubby and weird. I love it. Then I'm using an EQ to cut the lows out of it. And finally, Air Lo-Fi again to drop the bit depth, which is going to really distort it. And that's our sound. At the end of every 8-bar phrase, we have our guitar and bass come back in with the drums, just for 4 big hits. You'll hear it here. Then we have this annoying little synth come in. This is just a saw wave that dies off really quick. And again, put it through Air Lo-Fi to make it crunchy. That's all. The pre-chorus is pretty much the intro minus that synth lead. Nothing interesting going on there. Once we hit the chorus, we start bringing in some fun like pop synths, because this is where the song gets really poppy. We have, the J-pop singer going. And so we introduce some really poppy synths. Check this out. So up top, we have just a pad playing a single note. And I'm using LFO tool on a lot of these to provide that kind of pumping sidechain sound. Here, I can exaggerate it here so you can hear exactly what it's doing. As opposed to just that sound, right? And I'm going to use that on a lot of tracks. You'll see that show up just about everywhere, from the guitars, the drums, the bass, all the synthesizers. Anytime the chorus hits, LFO tool clicks on and starts doing that cool pumping thing. I also have a lead in the chorus playing this little ascending line. And it's on the offbeats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and like that. We can hear how that fits in with, say, the drums. Now you can hear the context, that how much bounciness that adds to the song, right? As for the sound design, this is nothing complicated. Again, it's 2 saw waves, one an octave higher than the other. And again, the reverb and distortion trick. I'm really not doing anything crazy here. Cool. On to the second verse. There's really not much going on here. We've got a simple kick drum sample, as well as just a dead simple saw wave for this bass. Now this is kind of cool. We've got this kind of, again, very organic, edgy sounding sub bass going on here. I like this. This sounds like the Doom soundtrack, like Mick Gordon's 2016 Doom soundtrack. I absolutely love it. To show you what's going on with this one, we have a simple saw wave here, as well as a sub sine wave setup over here. We also have distortion going on in the effects. I'm going to leave this here because it gets way too quiet if I don't have it on. But to show you what's making this warbling effect, notice I have unison turned up to 10 here, and detune turned up really high. Unison in Serum, like any other synth, introduces a bunch of duplicates of the same voice, the same sound, but it detunes them and spreads them throughout the stereo spectrum left and right. When a low frequency gets detuned, it can really start to warble with itself. I'm gonna retune it and you'll hear how much it tightens up. Check this out. So all that frequency interference with itself combined with running it through the distortion later gives you this really cool, freaky sound. I also have an instance of contact damage going on here, which is providing this cool drum loop going on in the background. Then we're back to the pre-chorus. This is kind of a slower breakdown version of it with a slightly different riff. Something important to note here, you'll notice this section sounds super tight. Take a listen. And you can see why. I've literally cut out the silence in between these sections. Without cutting out the silence on those guitars, you can hear all this noise in between. But now, obviously, this is super extreme, but you should do this. Anytime you're editing a guitar part with lots of pauses in it, absolutely cut the silence out. It helps so much to tighten up the sound. The second chorus starts with a kind of a quiet fake out chorus where we just drop to a couple synthesizers. In this case, I'm using the Arturia Emulator 2 to play the bass part. I just went with a preset. This is the Shadow Beast bass. And then FM8 using a bells preset I had, Glassy Bells. From there, we're back to our chorus setup from before. We get that crunchy guitar sound from before for the break. And then we're back to our distorted guitars for the breakdown. Then the lead synth comes back. And that's the instrumental for this song. Now let's talk about vocals. Like I said, this song has some female vocals, in this case provided by the Vocaloid Hatsune Miku, and some screamed lead vocals as well. Let's go part by part through the song and talk about what's going on in the vocals. This song opens up with a huge, long fry scream. Take a listen. I'll be honest, this is literally the first song I tried screaming on, so it's not the best fry scream, but it gets by. A lot of that is due to the mixing, which again we'll cover next week. Now, the verse has what I think are some really interesting vocal arrangement choices. For one, I can distinctly hear under the clean singing, I hear like this distorted whisper going on in the background, so I have a whisper track at the bottom of the screen here.
Hi, are you looking for the other side? Feel like nothing ever seems quite right.
And you'll hear what this whisper voice is adding to it. Here's the whisper.
Hi, are you looking for the other side?
Here's the lead with and without the whisper.
Hi, are you looking for the other side? Feel like nothing ever seems quite right. Are you circling the drain pipe, getting off on pain?
You can see it just adds that fizziness and that creepiness to the background. In the second half, a higher octave voice comes up.
I need to know where your layout tastes like.
Now, there's a couple things happening here. We do have just a straight up clean vocal singing the high part.
I need to know where your layout tastes like.
and then one doing kind of a half-screamed version of the same part.
I need to know where your loyalties lie.
You put them together.
I need to know where your loyalties lie. Tell me your...
And along with the low voice,
I need to know where your loyalties lie.
we get the full vocal sound of that section.
I need to know where your loyalties lie. Tell me, are you gonna bark or bite?
Now, throughout this section, these low false chord screams are interjecting with these 4-syllable phrases. You'll hear it here.
Getting off on pain like...
Again, I'm new to screaming, so I watched a few tutorials, and this seemed to be the approach that worked the best for me. I have 2 very low false chord screams happening, like this.
You're corrupted.
And they are panned just a little bit to the left and right. This gives them just a bit of width around the ears, and it makes it sound a little bit larger than it is.
You're corrupted.
Then I have a high false chord scream. Now, I can't really do it that high, so I'm just kind of like, it's like a Donald Duck sound. I don't know.
You're corrupted.
It's terrible, but it works.
You're corrupted.
And so those kind of interject in between each of these lines.
Getting off on pain like... I need to know where you lay your knife in the belly.
Now we're back to fry screams. We have a lead fry going on here.
Get the fuck up, wake the fuck up. Get the fuck up, wake the fuck up. Get the fuck up, wake the fuck up. Wake the system and back the fuck up.
Now, this section is doubled with both the fry scream and the false chords. You can hear it right here.
Wake the system and back the fuck up. You're a puppy when they cut you straight up. So come crawling back.
Something really important, something really subtle, is to line up all your consonants, especially at the end of big phrases, like here going into the chorus, that don't come crawling back. That cutoff, I manually nudged each of these so they all lined up just right. And now we're at our first Hatsune Miku section. Now, if you're not familiar with Hatsune Miku, she is a Vocaloid, a synthesizer program that you can type words into and place MIDI notes just like you would any other synthesizer. And then by carefully aligning all the consonants and vowels exactly where you want them through a system that is much more complicated than I expected, you get a singing voice that can do anything you want it to. Now, I have 5 main vocal parts singing on the chorus. The first is just a simple lead.
Destroying clouds in the sky.
Doubling her on just the first half of phrases. The question, not the answer, is another copy of her. I've pitch shifted it just slightly, changed some of the tonality of the voice so it doubles better.
Destroying clouds in the sky.
I have a backing vocal singing a harmony here. I have 2 backing vocals singing a harmony here. They are also 2 slightly different voices, just like I did with the leads, which is going to make a nice harmony when we bring it all together.
Destroying clouds in the sky.
Now, I don't have it on for this chorus. You can see it's grayed out, but later on I introduce an even higher harmony. It's very subtle, way in the background. And that is our chorus vocal stack. We also have just a simple lead vocal here in the second verse where she sings in Japanese, and I do not speak or read Japanese, so there was a lot of Googling getting this right. At the end of the second verse, a whole bunch of female voices shout, "You're corrupted." So I had to make a synthesizer shout, which was weird. You had to like draw the shout line. It was difficult. I got it though, I think. It sounds not great on its own. I combined that with a false chord scream here just so it didn't sound absolutely ridiculous. Now, going into the second pre-chorus, this is just the same as the first one, except it's all false chord instead of fry. So it's these very low guttural screams instead of the high squawky ones. And you'll notice it keeps alternating back and forth between these pairs of tracks. These are identical pairs of tracks. This is one pair slightly left and right, just like before. And this is an identical pair, slightly left and right. The reason for this is the lines kind of overlap with each other just a little bit. And I didn't want to cut any of the words short. So they kind of just fold over each other as you go through. You can hear it here.
Get the fuck up, wake the fuck up, wipe the system and back the fuck up.
Now, this section called for really high false chord screams, which I just can't do. He does like this really great like death metal high false chord scream. I can't do that yet, so I just threw a fry scream in there on top of it. And this really low guttural scream, which is just great. Going into the second chorus where we had that kind of quiet fake out, on the original, BABYMETAL does sing this. I wanted to do something just a little different for this one, so I sang it instead of having Miku do this one. So I started with a low version of the vocal. I brought it down an octave into my usual range.
Kingslayer, destroying castles in the sky.
At this point, I bring in an octave, singing it up high in like a falsetto voice.
Kingslayer.
It's really subtle.
Kingslayer.
And then I just belted the last line while still keeping in the lower octave.
I'll fight for you until I die. I'll fight for you until I die.
And then we're back into the chorus. And that's pretty much all the pieces of this song. Now, while I can't give away stems or MIDI files of this song for copyright reasons, I don't see any reason I can't give you the patches I made with this. So I'm going to put all these serum patches I made in the description down below if you'd like to download them for free. If you like this video, please subscribe for more stuff like this posted every week here on Dean Talks Music. I'm just getting started with this channel and I'm having a lot of fun with it. I got some huge plans for this year and I'd like you to be right here with me. So subscribe and hit that little bell thing and I'll see you here next week as we take a deep dive on how I mixed this track. If you have any questions about this song or anything else related to music or music production, leave them in the comments down below and I'll get back to you either in the comments or in a future video. Thanks for watching. I've been Dean DeMarzo and I'll see you next time.